Hello, it's Alex Wilson Campbell again, the founder of the Remote Work Life Summit. I hope you are well. I hope you had a good weekend. And yes, I've come to let you know that the Remote Work Life Summit is now at an end. And day 7, which was the 7th of April, was the final day of the summit sessions. And today, the 8th of April, is just really a wrap up, and just for me to say to you, thank you, just to really let you understand that the summit's over, and thank you for attending, thank you for participating. I really hope it's been something that's been of help to you. I mean, this is the very first Remote Work Life Summit, so I hope it won't be the last Remote Work Life Summit. And if there are things that you enjoyed about the summit, let me know, so that if we do have a future summit, then we can put those include them in a future summit. But if there's things that you didn't enjoy and you think that could be improved, let me know as well. Excuse me. But like I said, I want to thank you. I mean, although this is the end of the Remote Work Life Summit, this is not the end, in the sense that I am also launching a podcast to accompany the Remote Work Life Summit. So if you search iTunes and type in Remote Work Life or Remote Work Life Podcast, you'll be able to find the Remote Work Life Podcast. It's if you look out for a yellow icon, so it's black text on a yellow background, you'll be able to see and listen to podcasts that basically to help you to follow up on what you've learned. I'll also include some of the interviews that I included in the Remote Work Life Summit for you as well. So it's all about learning. And I think one of the things about learning, it's a continuous process. And I've learned so much. I've been planning the summit since October 2018, but I've been interviewing people for much, much longer than that. I've interviewed CEOs from around the world, from some of the biggest and best businesses you'll find anywhere. Some of the most purpose-led entrepreneurs I've spoken to, and there was a point where I was just going to keep all of that information to myself, but I decided that this is much bigger than me. I think there are going to be many more people interested in the information that these CEOs, entrepreneurs, thought leaders have to say. There's going to be lots more people who are interested, so I took it upon myself just to really share these interviews with you. And it's like I said, it's this event, I think it's much bigger than me. I hope it has helped you in whatever way. As I said, let me know if there are things that you, as I said, want me to include in any future summits, or indeed if you want me to include on the Remote Work Life podcast. And Nicole, thank you so much for joining me. And so, as I said, this has been a whole learning journey for me, and I'm an advocate of learning. And I perhaps took it for granted myself when I started to work on a remote basis. I started back in 2008, perhaps took it for granted slightly, and also just assumed that everybody else knew about remote work and knew what to do to get remote work and where to look, etc. But I found that over the years that is just not the case. Remote work is still very much perhaps not a go-to option for many people. And I know it suits so many people. So my personal circumstances, as you probably know, I've talked about this many times. My circumstances being that I've got 3 children. So I was at a point where I was in a digital agency, and we were working long hours and late hours often as well. So I didn't get an opportunity to really sort of see my kids grow up. I wanted to be there, but at the same time, obviously, I still needed to earn a level of income to sustain my family, my mortgage, etc., all those things. So remote work, it was logical. It was a logical step for me. But for many others, as I said, you perhaps get caught up in the work that you're doing and perhaps may not think about the other options available to you. And that's natural to do that. So again, that's another reason I brought you the Remote Work Life Summit, to let you know that there are other options out there for you. But I mean, your circumstances may be different to mine. Maybe that you want to travel the world, but work at the same time so you can actually sustain yourself. It may be that you just can't commute for whatever reason. It may be that you're in an isolated location, but you still want to be able to access the best roles in the world, and you can't do that by car or by train or wherever it may be. Remote work gives you the opportunity to do just that. It may be that you just want a bit more freedom and flexibility. So, I was at the point as well where I was being micromanaged, and I don't know anybody who likes to be micromanaged. And working remotely gave me that room to breathe. It gave me the ability to be able to work anywhere I want to work. I can work from the cafe, I can work from the library, I can work from home. So there are just so many opportunities and so many benefits to remote work. And I just want to really summarize some of the things that I've learned from the speakers. And I've written down a few words. This is in no particular order at all. And following on from that, here's my list. None of this is planned. I don't know if you can see that. It's probably a bit bright, but I've got a list here of things that I've learned from speakers like Nick Francis, who's the CEO of Help Scout, from Sarah Sutton, who's the CEO of Flex Jobs, who I interviewed as well. And just quickly before I go on to that, I'll leave some of the interviews inside the group for you for a few days. I know I said I'm only going to leave them online for 48 hours each day, but some feedback I've received during the summit is that there are just so many interviews to consume that it's just been impossible in some circumstances for you to consume them within 48 hours. So I'm going to leave them up for a few more days for you to have a look. But as I said, Sarah Sutton, one of the things she mentioned to me when I interviewed her was that we talked about the environmental impact and the environmental benefits of remote work, because what you're essentially doing is you're perhaps taking a few cars off the road, for example. Rather than having to commute by road to work, you're just having to perhaps take a bus maybe, or you walk to your desk. So there's so many benefits to remote work, and I want to continue to be an advocate and continue to talk to you about remote work and hopefully help you at some point get your transition from your co-located situation to wherever it is that you want to be in a remote world. So that's one thing, the environmental benefits. So I'm not just going to talk about the benefits, I'm going to talk about all the things that I've learned. So hard work is another thing that I've learned is an important aspect of remote work, because far too often we see videos of people on the beach with their laptop, and we see people taking pictures of themselves in front of flashy cars, and we get perhaps the impression that it's really easy and it's just all about sort of the leisure side of things. But yes, it can be about that, because working remotely, it does give you the freedom, the flexibility to be able to sort of balance things a little bit more. But at the same time, it takes hard work, whether you're a freelancer, whether you're starting your own business, or if you're working within a business. We still work hard. We still work just as hard, if not even harder, I might say, than our co-located colleagues. But it's hard work, and that was born from, I was able to see that when I first interviewed Michelle Dell. She's the CEO of Virtual Miss Friday, and she's just the personification of hard work. She started from nothing. She started from absolutely nothing. She built up a portfolio of property which she sold, which she then invested into herself and into growing her business into what now is a 6 and 7 figure business. And she did that whilst traveling across Europe to places like Greece. She's originally from the UK. She was my original inspiration when I heard her on Yara Starak's podcast. So hard work is very much, it's part and parcel of remote work. So yeah, if you're prepared to work hard, then you're going to flourish when it comes to remote work, or any kind of work for that matter. Trust is another thing that I learned, and this is important in the world of work, no matter what aspect of work that you're doing. But it seemed to be a word that came up quite a lot in the conversations I had with all of these CEOs. And obviously trust is important. Trust is important from the aspect of the CEO, or your hiring manager, or your manager, because obviously you've got to show them that what you're capable of, your skills, that you're committed to what they do. you have to instill that trust, try your best to instill that trust within them. If you're looking for a remote role, it can be quite difficult to actually get the person who's interviewing, for example, for a role, or if you're on a business development call, it can be difficult to get that person to trust you. So it's important to do what do what you say you're going to do. Make sure that you reach your deadlines, and make sure you're where you are when you say you're going to be there. Make sure you do the work that needs to be done. And also one way to actually develop that trust in people who don't know you, especially if you're a freelancer, is along the way collect testimonials. Collect, if you can collect video testimonials, that'd be a great idea. If you can collect at least written testimonials, you can use your LinkedIn profile to do that. If you can do that, then you can begin to build a whole list of people who you've served. And if somebody's then hiring in the future, they can see the work that you've done, they can see what you're capable of, they can see what other people have said about you. That's one way of actually instilling trust in people who don't know you, who are meeting you for the first time. So trust is an important thing. Another word on my list is community. Community is so important because there's so many things you get from community. And again, when I was starting out, I thought, let me just do this. I can do this all up on my own. I'm quite capable of doing this all on my own. But being a remote worker especially requires that you have a certain mindset. Yes, for perhaps 90% of the time you're going to be at home, or in wherever it is you choose to work from. 90% of the time you're going to be alone. And whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think it's important to have that community to bounce ideas from, to just really make new friends. Because obviously, if you're working remotely, you're not going to have as much sort of face-to-face contact with people. And if your team is not based in the same location as you, that can be even more of a challenge. But I think if you can find ways of connecting with people, whether that be LinkedIn, whether that be going to meetups, whether that be searching on places like Eventbrite and finding meetups and events that interest you. And they don't have to be work-related meetups and events. It can be events, as I said, that just interest you. It could be something about, I don't know, how to make delicious recipes. It could be any type of networking event, because you never know who you're going to meet. And it's important to have those face-to-face interactions. It can recharge your batteries. It can just help you to meet new people, as I was saying before. So having that community is important. And obviously support within that community is important as well. And if you can eventually get somebody who can mentor you, if you can build contacts with people who could potentially mentor you, I found that's really important for me as well. Because again, sometimes when you're working alone, especially if you're a freelancer and you don't have a team around you, then sometimes what you find is your head is just so focused on work. You're just so focused on what you're doing, you perhaps sometimes lose sight of what's going on in the outside world. So if you have that mentor, that person, just really sort of asking you questions about how your day is and what you're doing today, and what have you thought about doing this instead, sort of challenging you in a way, but challenging you in a way that's productive, then it can get you to think, it can get you to really be more refreshed, it can get you to sort of have more ideas. So building that community so that you can build your support network, whether that be mentors or just your peers within your community, that's something I've really learned as well from the speakers that I've spoken to over not just the Remote Work Life Summit, but over the years as well. So community and support. So the next thing on my list is expertise. That's a word that came up quite a lot. And, not just expertise, but a real understanding of where your expertise and experience lies. So what I see a lot of people doing, what I see a lot of people have done when they're trying to network within online forums or even face-to-face meetings and face-to-face gatherings, is what they tend to do is they tend to list everything that they can do. So they might talk about, I don't know, inbound marketing. They might talk about copywriting, sales, invoicing, accounting. They'll list everything that they can do. And I'm not saying that doesn't have value, but I think what I've learned from a lot of the CEOs that I've interviewed, from a lot of the hiring managers that I've spoken to, is that they want people, or at least when you're applying for a role or if you're pitching for a new role, they want to see quite quickly where your expertise lies. You know, they want to understand that if they're looking to generate leads, for example, that you can, you know, the skills that you have, the expertise that you have is going to enable them to do that. So you have to find a way of packaging that in a way that is clear, that's concise, and that tells them exactly what you're about. So expertise, that's a word that came up quite a lot. And linked to this actually is the word focus. That's another word that came up quite a number of times. I've interviewed, as I said, close to 30 CEOs in the last few months, and focus is something that they really, you know, they came up with quite a lot, and it came up in different sort of different guises, different sort of scenarios. So when they talk about focus, they talk about again linked to what I was just talking about with expertise. They want you to focus on making yourself an expert in your chosen area. So and I think this is something that's really going to be really important in the future, because I believe that the people who really kind of sort of hone down on their expertise and really focus as well on a specific niche, whether that be health and wellness, and within that you can focus even more. You can focus on specific areas of health and wellness. And this especially applies to the freelancers out there. If you can really focus on a specific area and get your expertise in that area, I think what you'll eventually get is people will come to you, because you'll become known as a thought leader, hopefully, as an expert in your niche, and people will hopefully be banging down the door to speak to you, to pick your brains, to, you know, have you as their, you know, as their client, or have for you to be their client, should I say. So you can really focus on an area of expertise and work on that for the next 6 months to a year, you'll find that you'll start to have people coming to you and ask you questions about that particular area of work. So focus is an area that came up quite a number of times in the conversations that I had with these CEOs. One particular conversation, actually, just before I move on, that I had with Steve Anson from Vortala. He's the CEO of Vortala. Vortala is a business that has hired 70 people across the world as part of its digital agency. And Steve, when he first started out, he did have a number of different areas that he was interested in, that he was focused on, that he was trying to learn about. But eventually he focused on the health space. And he started out, I believe he started out with chiropractors. He focused solely on servicing and understanding and helping chiropractors with their problems, because then what happened was that he became known as an expert in his area. He focused on that niche, and to this day he still focuses in on health, but he's now at a point where he can begin to expand. I believe he's now expanded to the dental profession, dental business owners. So yeah, his session, which is not available, actually the session is not available in the Facebook group. I reckon you should, if you're looking to sort of really hone down and really understand how to get that niche focus, then listen to Stephen Anson's session that I had with him during the summit. Bear with me a second while I just have a little drink of water, my dry throat. So another area that I spoke about a number of times and focused on quite a lot with Sarah Sutton, actually, is the whole problem of scams and really dubious roles. So as the popularity of remote work and digital nomadism and the laptop lifestyle, etc., becomes more and more in focus, you get more and more people trying to tempt you with adverts saying, you know, make money online, make X amount of money in X amount of time. And it becomes really confusing, doesn't it? Because you don't know who to trust, who not to trust. And not everybody out there who advertises a role is a scammer, by the way. There are some people out there who perhaps don't have the knowledge and expertise when it comes to how you should advertise a role so that it looks credible, so that it looks authentic. So you get people who perhaps advertise things that look slightly dubious. So that's a problem in itself as well. So Sarah and I, we talked about a few areas that you can look at to understand, or to begin to understand, if a role is dubious or not. And it can be difficult. Even the most genuine roles can be, when I say genuine, when the most, I suppose, well thought out and well presented roles are not always as honest as they should be. So there are just a few key things that Sarah and I talked about when you're doing your audit of roles online. So one of those things was that you should look at the history of the company. You should do your research in terms of who's in charge of the company. You should look at news online. You should talk to other people maybe who've either worked there in the past, or who perhaps even people who work there now. And I mean, that's just a few things that you can do, but I think it's really important to do your own due diligence before you commit yourself to even sending your CV with your personal details, because there are a number of scammers out there. There are a number of dubious opportunities out there. I saw one online the other day I saw a conversation online the other day where somebody had been convinced to part with thousands of dollars of their hard-earned money to pay for office equipment to set up their remote business. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of that one, but if somebody's asking you for money online, then, and you know, to buy something like office equipment, you should really sort of investigate that more. You shouldn't commit anything in terms of money up front, I would say, as well. Just really do your due diligence. And really what you can do is just look for sources of information. And what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to put together a list of, in fact, I've got a list so far of 50 businesses that hire people, on a remote basis. I've just had something to eat. Apologies for that. I've put together a list of businesses that hire people on a remote basis. I have 50 so far. I'm still doing the research, and I'll have hundreds available for you very soon. So if you're interested in that, then either drop me a yes in the comments, or go to remoteworklife.io and drop me an email there. So put together your own list as well of businesses that hire remotely. As I said, this list that I'm putting together, it's a list of businesses that are 100% remote and they hire remotely and they're legitimate businesses. So I'm hoping to make that a little bit easier for you as well when you're applying, or at least doing your due diligence and your research. So scams is another watchword, another sort of keyword that came up quite a number of times when I was interviewing people during the summit. And it comes up often as well in conversations online as well. So another word that is really important, and a word that came up a number of different times, is culture. The remote culture, I suppose it's a bit different to a co-located sort of idea of culture, and it's perhaps more important to have an understanding of what you're getting yourself into in terms of culture before you dive in, because it's very different. Working remotely is very different. You have to be on board with the culture of the business. It's one of those things where if you can first understand the culture, then you'll know, perhaps even before you apply, if it's something that will suit you or not. If you're not sort of on board with the culture of a remote business especially, then you can come to a point where you perhaps begin to feel perhaps disillusioned, because obviously all the other things that you have to sort of lean on in terms of the support and that I discussed earlier on, is not there. So you, as much as you do get support within a remote business, and you get people there for you if you have questions or if you have concerns, much of the time, if you feel as though you don't enjoy the actual culture of a business that is remote, then the feelings of perhaps, I don't know, even loneliness or isolation become a bit more sort of exaggerated, I suppose is the word, than it would be if you're working in a co-located situation. Because when you're in a co-located situation, as much as you're having a bad day, you can just simply speak to somebody who's sitting next to you, or you can, it can sometimes be masked in a way, because you might go later on down when everybody's finished work for the day, you might go out for a drink with your friends. So you can sometimes get away with not being totally on board with the culture of a co-located business, but it's much harder to do that it's much harder to do that in a remote scenario. So I think it's really important to understand the culture of a business before a remote business, before you actually dive in there. And this leads me not quite nicely onto my next point, because what I've found is a number of the hiring managers, CEOs, decision makers within these businesses are looking for people who have an entrepreneurial streak, and that's because I think that they believe that entrepreneurs have a certain mindset, I guess, a certain way of working, a certain set of values, are able to sort of work without sort of any sort of intervention almost. So, and I think what you get is a lot of people, I think it was Ben from Olark, I interviewed the CEO of Olark, and he said that they tend to hire people who had their own businesses or were freelancers, because they're able to then work without any sort of, as I said, any support for longer periods of time. And it's one of those things, you're able to sort of really sort of get into the actual culture of the business a lot quicker if you're working amongst people who have that sort of that mindset. But that's not to say all remote businesses work like that. But what you find is a lot of these remote businesses will deliberately look for certain types of people, and that therefore sort of determines the culture of the business in some ways. So entrepreneurship is a word that I came across a number of times when interviewing these people. I think the most important thing that I understood from all of these interviews is the idea of self-understanding, understanding yourself before you dive into making any applications online for roles that you see advertised for remote businesses. Or if you're a freelancer, understanding, really what makes you tick, what your strengths are, where your areas of weakness are as well. Because if you have that self-understanding, you can then focus, there's that word again, focus on pushing yourself in that particular direction. And part of that self-understanding is understanding your own purpose in many ways, understanding your own purpose, because that will help you to then, go in the direction of finding not only people, but businesses that are aligned with that purpose, or as close to that purpose as possible, close to that mission as possible. So one way in which I advocate, for example, in terms of finding businesses that you could really focus on, and really sort of enjoy working for, and people who you feel that you may be connected to, is by really sort of thinking about some of the real problems that we're having in the world today, some of the problems that we're having that need people and businesses to change them, because it's really the people and businesses that are going to make the change that we need in the world. It's not politicians, it's people and businesses. So if you can have that understanding, so let's just throw an example out there, that one that I use quite often. The problem with plastics, for example, in the ocean. If you can then research problems like plastics, for example, that you feel really passionate about, you can then begin to search businesses that are focusing on, making those changes in terms of those problems. So, it could be, I can't think of any specific examples of the plastics issue, but again, if you can really understand those particular problems, you can align yourself with those problems. You can find jobs, you can find businesses, you can find projects where you can then be that person or be that business or be within that company that is solving that problem, or at least helping to solve that problem. And I spoke to, as I said, Nick Francis from Help Scout. And the problem that he wanted to help solve, it wasn't an environmental problem, but it was more focused on the idea that there was a big explosion of people wanting websites or online-based businesses. And of course, Nick Francis, being the CEO of Help Scout, they saw, not just a problem, but they saw this sort of culture shift. And that's another thing that's important. It's not just good enough to identify the problem. It's also an important, it's important to identify culture shifts whereby people are actually trying to find solutions to those problems, and therefore, they may be sort of interested in paying somebody to actually find a solution to that particular problem. So he had spotted that, not only the problem, but he spotted the culture shift whereby more and more people were going online. And obviously, if you're online, one of the most, or at least if you're a customer and you're looking at a website and you want a question answered quickly, Nick came up with the idea of like instant messaging, of having somebody there, a virtual assistant in many ways. You've probably seen it when you go onto a website and you see in the bottom right hand corner usually a little box pop up, a little pop up come up asking you if you need any help. And behind that particular pop up is somebody. So if you type your question in, somebody will receive that question and be able to give you an answer to your question pretty much immediately. And that's literally what Nick Francis from Help Scout does. That's what his business does. His business helps businesses to actually engage with people from the get-go, from the very start of their sort of interaction with a website. So Nick identified the problem. He identified the culture shift. He then went on to service a few. Sorry, not before he did that. He actually tried and tested the idea for himself on himself. So he got like the minimum viable product, and then he went out there and he tested that on a few clients, and then the clients really liked the idea, and at that point he grew the idea, and now he has hundreds and hundreds of customers worldwide. Having those hundreds of customers has also enabled him to build 100% remote business, which helps people like you and me to go remote and to have that sort of remote work life that we need for that flexibility. So I say all of that. I've gone the long way around of saying that having an understanding of yourself, which is what Nick had, helped him to then grow not only himself, not only his passion, but also his business, to the point now that he's helping other people to transition from working in a co-located situation to a remote working environment. So those are all the things that I've learned. I mean, I'm sure I could go on for much longer. There's many other things that I've learned from interviewing all these great speakers. As I said, I hope you didn't miss the speakers from the Remote Work Life Summit. If you did miss some of the speakers, then have a look at the videos tab in the group, and you'll be able to see a selection of the speakers that I interviewed during the summit. And as I said, this is not the end. As sad as I am to be closing out the summit today, I'm really sad. It's been a long journey. It's been a long time coming, and as I said, I hope you've benefited from these interviews. It's not the end. I'm also launching a podcast as well to continue to help you in whatever way I can. If there are specific areas of working remotely or trying to find a balance in your work and your life, as I said, as a working parent myself, it was something that was really a hot subject for me. It's a growing subject now. If there are areas that you are trying to find or you have problems with yourself, I want to use the Remote Work Life podcast as the medium to help you. So if you do listen to podcasts, go to iTunes and search for Remote Work Life, and look out for a yellow, it's a yellow logo with Remote Work Life written on it. Have a look at that, and also give me your feedback. You can, feedback in the comments. You can drop me a line via instant messenger on Facebook or LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search for Alex Wilson Campbell. You'll find me there. As I said, really sad to be closing out the Remote Work Life Summit today. I'll continue to share more interviews that I did, because I've interviewed so many other people. I interviewed Jay Cohen Gilbert, who is the co-founder of B Lab. I interviewed Eric Ryan, who's the CEO and founder of Method Products. So I'll continue to share interviews for you, because it's all about learning from these people. These people have been or are successful. So it's only fair that we can learn from them, so we can implement their best ideas to our own careers, to our own businesses, to our own journeys to be successful ourselves. So that's it for now. I've spoken for nearly 40 minutes. I hope it's been useful for you. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you for joining me on these calls. I see Christine is there as well. Thank you, Christine. I really appreciate you for joining me. Nicole, I appreciate you so much for joining me as well. Lets me know that I'm not the only one speaking to myself. As I said, let me know if there's anything else that you need help with. And all the best with your career, with your business going forward. And I look forward to speaking with you soon, and keep a lookout for the Remote Work Life podcast. See you soon. Bye.